What's happening, YouTube? In today's video, we're replacing the suspension on my Tacoma. Now, with the magic of video editing, hopefully this video won't be anything more than like 10 minutes max to do the front and rear suspension. However, this is a process that I've already done before once when I lifted my truck. I have a 2.5 inch ARB OME, Old Man Emu, is what that stands for, lift on this. And that took me and a buddy like close to 10 hours. Now, it's a lot easier when you're not doing a suspension lift and you're just replacing parts, which is what we're gonna do here. But if you are here for the lifting component, just make sure that one, you have the correct tools, and two, you block out a lot of time to do this. If you're doing it solo, I would block out an entire weekend and just give yourself some wiggle room so you're not trying to slap your truck back together for work on Monday and get somewhere. So without further ado, we're gonna take the front wheel off first. We're gonna start on the front suspension. I'll show you guys how to do that. And then we'll hop to the back and we'll do the leaf springs and the shock that is back there. All right, so now that the truck is all jacked up and our tire is off, let's talk about what we're actually gonna be tackling here today. So we're gonna be removing this shock. And if you're installing some sort of lift kit, you may have some spacers to install on the front sway bar. So that would be dependent on the kit that you have and what it requires. We're also going to be loosening up some bolts down here on our lower ball joint. Also, if you are lifting the truck and you haven't done this already, you should definitely install the clamshell bushing by ECGS to replace your stock needle bearing. The stock Tacoma does not like to be lifted more than like 2.5 inches, because what happens is these CV angles start to get steeper. That needle bearing that's up in here in your differential can actually end up exploding and destroying the rest of your diff. All right, so first thing you want to do is actually mark your alignment tabs, just for the sake of realigning once we're all done. These are back here. You can just do that with a Sharpie or something like that. And then we're gonna loosen this nut on the lower control arm. It's a 22. Remember, I said loosen, I did not say remove. So just enough to allow this thing to swing freely. And that might take a little bit of elbow grease, so I'll do that off camera. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna come down here to our lower ball joint. You're gonna find 2 bolts underneath of here. You're gonna find another nut in the middle that's called a castle nut with a cotter pin through it. Do not touch the castle nut, leave that in place. These 2 bolts right here are 19 millimeter. We're gonna loosen those, and then we're just gonna take them straight out. Now, prior to removing that lower ball joint, you'll see that I've brought my floor jack here, and I've just put a little bit of pressure on the lower control arm. This way we maintain the pressure on the spring and the coil assembly up here, and then in that way we can take things off without it coming flying down at the ground at us and damaging something. All right, next thing we're gonna do here is to loosen up this lower shock mount. Remember, I said loosen, do not remove. We're gonna use that to hold the shock in place here as we start to take pressure off of this. You will find videos that tell you it's okay to use this assembly here as a spring compressor. To me, that's really dangerous. Pay the extra 50 bucks, buy your coil springs pre-assembled, therefore making this process a whole lot safer. So let's come up here to the top. And because we are already pre-assembled, and because I'd actually like to sell these shocks because I'm sure somebody would buy them, we're going to come up to these little studs around the top hat. You have 3 of them here, and we're going to loosen those up. We're not going to touch that. If you touch that, that's going to start releasing tension on the shock and spring itself, and this whole thing's going to fall apart. We don't want to do that. All right, now that we've gotten those 3 top bolts removed, you can see that this thing should just kind of swing away freely. I was supporting it with my floor jack. And then what I did was I just gradually kind of let it down. And now we have access to that shock. And what we're gonna do next is just remove that lower bolt there. And then we should be able to pull this whole thing out. Again, do not take out that center nut there, that really rusty one in the center of your screen. Don't take that out, because if you do, this entire thing is gonna decompress and you could lose an eye, you could even possibly kill yourself. A spring under tension has a whole bunch of stored potential energy and could absolutely kill you if it hits you. All right, I've gone ahead and just seated this hand tight with that bolt through there and the nut on and the washer on. I used my floor jack down there to gradually kind of crank this up into place and align it as I went. Now we're just gonna torque those 3 top bolts down. I'll put the specs up here in the screen, and then we will tighten down the lower shock mount as well. Okay, so I've got the axle supported with my bottle jack there. And again, the truck is supported by 2 normal jack stands up there. Next thing we're gonna do is start to disconnect all of this. Disconnect your brake cable here. It's that nut, and I will put the specs up on the screen right now. We'll take that off. And then after that, we're gonna come around back here, disconnect the lower shock mount, and then disconnect all of the bolts that are on the bottom of our plate there, holding our U-bolt onto the leaf spring and onto the axle. Alrighty, with the brake line disconnected, we're now gonna go down to the lower shock mount and disconnect that. Good to have a second set of hands, or at least a second ratchet here. Get this thing off. All right, with our shock mount, lower shock mount now disconnected, we're gonna come underneath, and you have 4 22mm bolts, which you're now gonna disconnect. Kind of do them in a cross pattern and let this thing fall off all in one piece. Well, after needing to break out PB Blaster and the breaker bar from hell, I got those U-bolts off. They were totally seized. That was a blast. Next thing we're gonna do is come up here to the top of our shock, and if you are replacing your shocks, we're gonna remove that bolt. Now, these are not under compression like the front shocks, so you don't have to worry about this thing flying off. You may run into the issue where the whole shock assembly starts spinning. So what you wanna do is get a small wrench, and put it over top of your big wrench. And you'll see there's a notch in the top hat thing here that allows you to hold it so that it doesn't spin. If I don't hold it, see how this entire thing starts spinning? That's no good, you're not loosening anything. All right, with our shock now removed, we have some more space to work. So we're gonna come up here. This is a 19 mil on the back, and you shouldn't be under any kind of compression. If you are, lower the truck. We're gonna need to get a wrench in there. Get a wrench in here to hold the back side. Come around to the back side of this. 19 mil again. Loosen it up, and this whole thing should come out. Then we'll come up here to the front mounting point. It's a 19 mil. Do the same thing that we just did on the back, and your leaf spring should be free. Now, if your kit requires it, we're gonna take our old shackle here and take out the bushing that was mounted to the frame and replace it with a fresh one. It's also a good idea. Throw some grease on the inside of this just to keep it from squeaking and keep things moving and grooving. So in most leaf springs, you're gonna find that there's actually a front and a back side, and also a passenger and a driver's side. So for the Ironman 4x4 heavy duty leaf springs that I'm using here, this one is marked DS on top, which you can see right there. Sorry, that's upside down. So that's driver's side. And then we have a side here with a diamond shape. That's the back of the truck. And then on the front, we have this thing that curves up. That's the front, or closest to the cab. So pro tip here, when you're putting in your new leaf spring, the first thing you want to do is get that middle part seated correctly, and then loosely attach your U-bolts to that plate with nothing else connected. This will make it a lot easier for you to actually lock those down. It's very difficult once both pins are through on either side of the leaf springs to then maneuver the middle. So start with that, loosely fit it. As you can see, I still have a lot of thread showing there, but just enough to keep that center pin from popping around. Well, turned out to be a duel between new leaf springs and old exhaust, and new leaf springs won. So there it is. We are all finished, finally. 3 days of solid 6.5, 7-hour days getting this done, because I did it by myself. So maybe if you're doing it, maybe consider doing it with a buddy, or just have a second set of hands at some point, or a third set of hands. Either one would make this a whole lot easier, but it is possible. I love the way the truck is sitting. I'm exhausted. If you made it this far, thank you for watching this long, and have a great day. If you have any questions, comments, throw them down in the comment section, and I'll be happy to answer them to the best of my ability. Until then, I will see you on the next.